Oh, we are live. Hello. My ginormous head, which sometimes happens. We don't ever know when we go live. Okay, we are live. I am very excited. We, of course, are launching a new podcast called Be in the Room. It's really where we explore all of the ways that we are people. We have value. We have worth in the world outside of the roles we take on. And just to give you some background, if you haven't heard of this podcast before, haven't seen our other, we will be posting it live right now on all the platforms, and then it will be recorded and put as a podcast wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Now, the big thing where this came from is that someone messaged me and said, I can't really give a lot right now to the workrooms in the Catalyst. And I was like, what do you mean you can't give a lot? They're like, well, I've just got a lot going on. And sometimes I just come in and sit in the room. And I was like, okay, but except you paid to be there. You paid to be in this room. You paid to be a part of this community. You've given already quite a lot. And it was interesting because talking to them, it was an interesting kind of reflection on how we feel like we have to always be these contributing members, or we have to always be giving to the communities that we're a part of. So today I have Briar Harvey. Briar and I are definitely conspirators and collaborators and in cahoots on a bunch of different things.
All the C's.
Yeah, all the things and all the C's. Co-creators, all the things, but also disruptors. I would say both you and I kind of like to disrupt the norm. We like to question things. Briar, give us a little bio about what you do in the world. And I know we're going to start off with a role, and then we're going to talk about who you are without those roles, but give us a little intro.
Okay, so the roles are, I am the founder of the Neurodiversity Media Network, which is a collaborative media organization. We record master classes with our collaborators, and then we take all of that stuff and turn it into a bunch of formats. So it's live, and then it's video, and then it's audio, and then it's transcripts, and then it's blog posts, because neurodiverse people learn in lots of different ways. So I want to have as many formats available as possible. On the side, we do accessibility audits for companies large and small to figure out the ways in which to make their businesses most accessible for neurodivergent people.
You're also a mother and a partner and
Yes.
a friend.
Yes.
And you have many roles that you take on, and you're Briar. That's like one of the best roles ever is Briar. You're the best Briar you can be.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So you've been in the Catalyst now for almost a year, I think. Seems like it's been for a while. So it's interesting. What are the things that you've noticed about being in the room, being in the community?
I think my favorite thing about the Catalyst is the way in which everyone is always available. If you're in the room, if you are at the table, you are welcome to have a thought or an opinion, even if it's not always relevant to the thing that we are discussing.
Yeah, and we don't really worry too much about it.
No.
Sometimes we go way off the rails, and then we come back, we're like, we were originally talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important?
Safety. That's about safety. When we talk about creating spaces for people, the foundational requirement of feeling safe and feeling seen is what enables us to be there in that space. And the more people come, the safer they feel, which is kind of how these sorts of things work. You get out what you put in.
I mean, sometimes I think there's like this fine, and we're going to be playing with this as we have more members come in to the spaces, but it's like, what's that safety number? Because Right now, I'd say we're a pretty close knit group of people. We all kind of know each other. There might be some people that come in more than others, but it is you get to know that safety because of the people being in the room. One of the things when you joined, did you join? I can't remember now, like because it's been a while. But did you join? Were you working on a project? Or did you need help with something, or was it just like it's time? Briar needs to be in the room.
So Alice had a lot to do with this for me, actually, because I joined right around the time that I was considering starting the network and figuring out what my pivot was. And I knew that I was done coaching, but I wasn't sure how to make that profitable.
Yeah, I remember Alice was like, I think Briar needs to be here. And I was like, absolutely. Without a doubt, it was like, yeah, absolutely. Briar needs to be in the mix of what we're building here. Um, and it's interesting because you've taken on a few roles in the community. I don't know if by choice or it's just like by habit. But one of definitely you're one of the people who always checks in with other people. Not just be like, hello, can I interest you in a podcast? But you really do
I
remember
do
what's
that
happening
too.
in people's lives and you check in on them and you kind of give them a follow-up. And you also are the person that comes in and I would say creates a stir. And what I mean by that is like you usually have some sort of juicy nugget for us to kind of launch off of, which I really appreciate because there's only so much news I can read and there's only so much stuff I can keep up. You usually come in and go, "Have you heard this?" And we're like, "No," which I think
Oh,
is really
that's
interesting.
true.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because when we're working, sometimes we're just head down and we're so focused. We don't really think about having a space where we can just, gossip about the latest shenanigans that are happening in the world around us. And we can't do it again and also in a safe space, which I think is really interesting. That you bring a lot of stuff in there and we kind of go through it and everybody brings in some perspective and some experience. And I know for me, when you do that and everybody contributes, it becomes like I get different perspectives. I get to hear different lived experiences. I get to hear different reactions, which helps me form different ideas in my head. So I would say that's a role that you've taken on willingly, of coming in and being a bit of the herald, like, "Do, do, 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 do. Have you heard this?" Is that something you have always done?
So for me, it is about perspective. I always want to hear how other people are forming their opinions about things. It fascinates me the way that people decide what and how they want to believe in something. And I think a big part of this for people is that I don't know. Maybe this is autistic. Maybe this is just the fact that I am a lifelong navel gazer. I don't know. But it's really always been a point of curiosity for me. How do people believe what they believe? How do they build those beliefs? How do they use those beliefs to act upon them? And so I'd say 70% of the time, when I bring something into the workroom, I have no opinion about it. None whatsoever. It's here's a thing. What does everyone else think about it? So I can take in these inputs and then make up my own mind.
You're like the church, no, not the church lady, Linda, verklempt, Coffee Talk with Linda Richmond
Ah,
on her
yes.
SNL. Like, oh, I'm a little verklempt. I'll give you a topic. Talk amongst yourselves. That's kind of like what you do in there. And I think it's an important part of the community. I think it's an important part of being in the room, that you do contribute because it just gives us that time away from thinking about our business. It gives us that time, but also usually they're topics that impact our business. We were talking last night about the you know an influencer who has found his religion or found his faith and is and has been known to use his influence to really lead his followers in a particularly harmful direction before, and now we're seeing him possibly doing this again. And it's a really interesting process. So after we had that conversation, I was like, I'm acutely aware. I don't want to create, I don't want to accidentally create a cult. We've talked about this before. It's my one big fear that I accidentally create a cult. But it's things that I want to put into place in my own business about, like, people looking to me or you or Alice or any of the, the big leaders in the room, Biba, Darcy, who are showing up all the time as like the experts. And so whatever they say is the gold, the gold. No, like it's like, form your own ideas, play with it, test it out, see if it works. These are things that I really want to implement into the Catalyst. And so it actually got me thinking. I probably took about 3 hours after, which I told you that I'd dream about it, and I did. But I was really thinking about it. It's like, okay, how do we put things into place where we do not put our experts up on a pedestal, where we continually to foster the community and the environment that everybody has an opinion and it might not match with yours, but how do you have really great conversations about it, and how does it spur critical thinking?
And I think that, so for me, a big part of this is that I truly believe it's okay to not have an opinion at all. That that there are many things in the world which I do not have to have an opinion on. And in those times then, what I want to have is people who have opinions that I can refer other people to. Obviously, that's a big part of what I do with the network. So I'm constantly looking for experts and people who have opinions about things. That's a capital O and a capital T, right? Opinions about things. I'm looking for those people because I just don't. And I think that it's important to be able to gather those opinions and gather the data and then make up your mind.
So this is a really dangerous thing you've done, because people are really getting comfortable forcing people to have an opinion on topics. And if you don't have an opinion, we know what your opinion is. And whoever's asking you, automatically assumes it's the opposite of whatever that they were hoping you would say. Tell me more about that.
So this is a position that has evolved a lot over time. But when I think about freedom, it's not always the freedom to do a thing. It's a freedom to not do the thing too, right? That the anti-freedom, or the opposite of the action, needs to have as much space to happen as whatever the thing is. And especially in our modern culture, we have the freedom of speech, right? The freedom to say all of the things. And I am especially reluctant to require that everybody have an opinion about everything. It's like when, and I have a really good example for this. Every time Taylor Swift doesn't have an opinion about politics or something happening in the media, there are Swifties all over the place talking about how disappointing it is that Taylor didn't come out with an opinion about this thing. And I'm like, y'all, the last I checked, Taylor's a musician. Now, let me be clear. One of my personal favorites, I love almost everything Taylor does, and she's a musician. So I'm going to go to her for opinions about music. If I want to know what we should be talking about when it comes to writing a song or producing, I want to talk to Taylor. I don't really care what Taylor thinks about politics. I don't really care what she thinks about current events, not because she's not entitled to have an opinion about those things, not even because her opinion can't sway public opinion at large, right? Taylor has a huge fan base. If Taylor were to come out for or against something, that would absolutely affect the views of millions of people. And how smart is it of Taylor to know that she has that power and to not use it?
Yeah, I personally try not to have an opinion about anything I don't know anything about, because I find that it gets me into trouble. Our brains are very interesting things. We don't know, enough about them, but I do know that once I decide an opinion, my brain looks for confirmation on that opinion,
Constantly.
regardless of it actually being true. And I don't want to get myself into a position where I will fully say, like, no, this is true, and then stop looking for the reasons why it's not true because I've got so many things going on. And I think it's an interesting thing that you just said, not participating. So I'm less interested about people's opinions and I'm more interested about what they do with that power. And we've talked about Joe Rogan, we've talked about, like the big players in the world, the influencers who are a little more reckless than I like to be personally with their influence on other people, full well knowing that their audience will not go do the research to prove you wrong. There, of course, will always be a segment of people who are out there to prove you wrong, no matter how important or awesome or
Always.
you are. Absolutely. And God love them. Like, good, good. Keep asking those questions. But there are not enough people going and saying, I don't know that really is true. Can I go get, 5 or 6 different opinions to just form it? Because it just doesn't happen. We don't have time for that. So when we look at organizations using celebrities to be their spokespersons, to be their mouthpieces, to be their influencers, this is a really dangerous time we're in because information spreads so quickly. And now we have people being seen as these sources of information when it's not their lane.
Right. And it shouldn't be their lane. I worry about the number of people who are so easily influenced and won't go and do the research. And obviously, we can look, the numbers are clear. Extremism, both progressive and conservative, is on the rise.
Yes.
There are growing factions of people who are absolutely modern day terrorists
Yes.
doing things in the world because they have decided that theirs is the only way. And I can't sit comfortably with that. I can't be okay with people not being open to an alternative.
The other side of it, branching off of the Taylor Swift thing, is when you see these celebrities that are putting themselves in the room. This is the title of this is called Be in the Room. And we see celebrities or people with influence inserting themselves into room. And sometimes it's interesting, um, it's one thing to help put some information behind a cause, but sometimes they're in the room and they're taking up space from people who really should be in the room, experts or different perspectives, different diversity, being in the room. And so it's an interesting time for us to also kind of step back. The part of being in the room is also making sure that you've left room for other people to be in the room.
Part of having not an opinion and holding not an opinion is that other people have opinions and are experts. And that's always what I'm doing, is looking for those people who have done the work, who have developed the skill to say, this is what I think, not this is what you should believe. And I think that that distinction is not clear enough. The people that I want to learn from aren't ever telling me what to believe. They are only telling me what they know.
Yeah, that's one thing I have to be really careful in the catalyst too, is just like, listen, what I'm saying to you right here, right now, is one edition of the entire possible realms based on my own lived experience. I always try to like put this like a bias and judgment disclaimer on everything I say, because it is severe. While I have done a lot in the world, it's still severely limited to mostly my perspective, and then any perspectives I've gathered along the way, which would has an inherent bias built into it, because of safety, because of people who I respect, because people who I've had, been able to give me answers, I will give them more weight onto what they've said. When we look at making policy decisions or making decisions for our business or making decisions for our lives, I think part of being in the room too is knowing what you need to show up for. And that might be like, to keep yourself safe, to keep your family safe. How do you know when to be in the room and when not to be in the room?
I call these the hills to die on, right? What are your personal hills to die on? And truly, I have very few. There are very few things that I feel like I am the only definitive expert to be answering this question.
Okay.
And
Really? You have the only definitive expert?
no.
Oh. I was like, that's
No.
impressive. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I was reading a post on Facebook earlier today that was talking about the knowledge gap in like imposter syndrome, that people who don't know things perceive themselves as experts because they don't know how much they don't know, whereas experts know what they don't know and also have an imposter syndrome around how much they still don't know. And what I said was that true experts who have mastered their craft know exactly what their territory is. We know all of the places where our knowledge is, and we know where it is not. And when I don't know where it's not, I usually, 90% of the time, have a reference for someone who does cover that piece of territory. Because if you actually have done the work, have developed an expertise, you have peers at that point in time. And it's,
or at least hope you do.
or
If you don't, that's a warning sign.
That's correct, because there's no competition between me and people who are arguably exactly my competition, but we do such different things that I can say I will walk up to the edge here, but no farther. When you get to that place, you need to go call this person instead. I've lost you.
Because I didn't unmute. I like saying I don't know. I don't know. Partly because it can get me out of doing work. But two, it can also, because I tend to adopt work if I do say I know a little bit of it, and then all of a sudden you've got the whole thing on your plate. But also because I think I like the learning process when I don't know so much. Like, it's so fun to hear from other people who do know, or to go on a research spree, or to go like, to me, knowledge acquiring is a lifelong sport.
Absolutely. And I think that once you've reached the level of true expertise in a field, it's it's a sport that you get to play with other people who know similar things to you, and then you're sharing knowledge and collaborating, and
Yeah.
so it's not competitive because we're both growing.
I've always said that mastery begins when you realize you're always a student. And
Mhm.
before that, if you think you're a master and have nothing else to learn, and that's an interesting part about being in the room in the catalyst too, is that it's not meant to be a place for people to come and learn necessarily. We don't say like we're just selling sales funnels, so come learn how to do a sales funnel. We're learning how to do things just a little bit better. Everybody in there has enough knowledge to get themselves into trouble and
In
maybe
some
get it,
cases, a lot of
or a
trouble.
lot of trouble, and maybe get themselves out of it. But we have the opportunity to have a community where we share in the building and the growing and the scaling. So one, people see things that you don't see when you're in the mix. Two, you always learn from other people. Like every day I'm in there, I'm learning something from somebody, whether it's personal development, business development.
I think part of why the catalyst works so well is that most of us really are experts in our field. And
Right.
so there is a real sense of camaraderie at the table that people are going to understand where you are,
Yeah.
and what they have to offer is the next level of the information that you're looking to develop. And no one truly, I don't feel like anyone ever talks out of turn or talks about things that they don't know or understand. That doesn't happen in the catalyst. It just doesn't.
Yeah, well, nobody has anything to prove, and I think this is an interesting. It was one of the impetus for me to create the catalyst because I'd spent so much time in Facebook groups where everyone had to be perfect, everybody had to know all the answers, everybody had to respond to all the questions because, of course, your potential clients are always watching you, and that's so much pressure. It's like, oh, they're always watching, but also like you couldn't ask for help, you couldn't celebrate the stuff that you had going on because people felt it was self promotion. Like there was just so many restrictions to being in the room. But then they're like, we want your engagement. It's like, you want my engagement, but you won't let me engage. You won't let me actually contribute or show, and then you have business owners that if they felt like you were infringing on their expertise in any given way, you all of a sudden were turfed out of that. And it wasn't like, I'm not
Right.
trying to steal your clients. I'm trying to add to the conversation. And I even get this now. I have a hard time on the Facebook feeds, the public Facebook feeds, because I'll see some really amazing posts by colleagues and I want to feed into the conversation, but I realize that it's a selling post and that if I go in and I add something to the conversation, they're going to then write a post about me about how I came and tried to sell on their wall or something. So I often don't comment anymore on other people's posts, like at all. I create stories and then hope that people come and join me on my wall because I don't have those kind of rules, like promote. Like if you got something and you want to like drop that link. I absolutely 100% want people to have choices. But it was so restricting and to know who to be at any given moment.
So, truly, the happiest day of my life was when I decided to let my membership go.
Right.
Because I no longer felt like I had to compete in a model of forced scarcity. And I truly don't think that it exists, but I think that we have cultivated this environment where we're always competing rather than collaborating and supporting.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, this has led to a lot of really uncomfortable situations for me because I am autistic and don't read the room well. So
Guilty.
don't know when I'm missing these whatever, especially online. How the fuck am I supposed to know whatever signal I'm missing when it's not explicitly given to me? And
Yeah,
I don't have the emotional bandwidth to deal with that kind of hurt and rejection on such a regular basis.
yeah.
And instead of allowing myself to feel open to the possibility of more experiences, it has in fact led me to cancel memberships, to restrict my activity, and to really tighten down the number of voices I am allowing into my space.
Which is, it's unfortunate because I
Mhm.
think now you, and we talked about, knowing when to be in the room, but now you're basically restricting who's allowed in your rooms. And it's, anytime we start to silo off, I think that, I mean, we're
It's
missing out
really
on
dangerous.
so many opportunities for growth and creativity. I mean, you and I were a part of a community that we had to leave, not necessarily by our choice. And because, people felt like they were being attacked or usurped. And it was an interesting observation, I think, for you and I both. It happened a few months apart. And it was just like, wait, what happened? What happened? You just find yourself all of a sudden, you're like, wait a second, what? Things are what? This person doesn't like me anymore? Like, what is happening? And
In
it's
public,
it,
too, without naming names, but in public. Like, I just,
you had a full post written about you,
oh,
like a page
yes.
6 style, like,
Oh,
and
yes.
and people that we knew were like, "Oh my god," and they didn't know that it was you being talked about. That they were like out with their pitchforks.
Oh, it
They
was
were
terrible.
ready. They were gonna run you out of town, and then all of a sudden you're like, "No, actually, that's about me," and that didn't happen. And it was an interesting. You wrote it like a surfer on top of a wave. Like you were just like, "We're not doing this today. I don't have time. There are other things to do. If this is what you want to do with your time, good day to you, sir." And I really applaud you for that. But it was fascinating to watch.
So, having been canceled more than once now in my life and career, I can truly say that a big part of what happens here is how the person responds to it.
Yeah,
Because in that case, oh man, I had so many options. I could have gone on full blast
yeah,
and turned it into an entire war if I had
debacle.
wanted
Yes,
to. If
yes,
absolutely could have, because it's happened before. So I have receipts.
we
Like,
all
and
did.
I had receipts.
Yeah,
But I really had to ask in that moment and continue to ask, what would I have gained? What would that have accomplished? And the answer is nothing. Nothing would have been gained. So why?
yeah. I mean, it's part of it is like I always think it's like it's a big whole world out there, and there's just so many opportunities, right? So if something doesn't work with one area, then you move on to the next. And if one, like that happens. I mean, eventually you'll run out, depending if you're living in a small town, eventually you'll run out of friends. But it's for me, I don't, part of me being in the room is that I'm only going to show up in the rooms where, again, I feel safe, I feel heard, or I feel like I can contribute, or be valued without contributing. And this is a big thing for me because in that circle, it was all about what you could do for other people. And I don't like living in a world of favors owed. I don't like living in a world where, and I've talked about this before, where people will manufacture things that you owe them. Well, I promoted your program, so you should promote mine and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't, no, I didn't agree to that. We didn't have a contract. I never asked you to do that. Like, those are things that you created in order to create power imbalances. And people don't like to know that, don't like to be reminded of that. But I don't have the time to owe people favors. I come into things with like a full, like, Briar, we're gonna do something together. Okay, here's what we're both gonna get out of it. And I like having those clear contracts. If I'm gonna do something nice for somebody else, they don't know I did it.
You know, to answer your question of before, when will I put myself in the room? It is when I know that there is reciprocity there. And honestly, I have very few rules in my engagements with collaborators, with partners. I need to know that you are going to put in exactly as much as I am going to put in. And I know that can be hard for people to judge, and there can be some trust issues there because often people will say they'll do a thing and then not do a thing. But I've really kind of learned how to test those waters, ask for a small thing, see what happens, and then go from there. You don't get to be one of my partners unless I've really put in and you've put in the work to make that an equal exchange.
It's interesting though, like, what do you call equal exchange? I mean, the things that I find valuable and the things that you find valuable might
Are
be two
not the
different
same
things.
thing.
Yeah.
I think it's energetic. Truly, it's about you feeling like you're getting back what I am putting in. And the same has to be true for both of us. I think that, again, this could just be me being autistic, but I think that people place too much emphasis on keeping score in relationships rather than checking in and seeing how everyone feels. So when you tell me you are fine, that you like our agreement, I believe you.
That's fair.
That's all I can do. So we've created an agreement for an exchange. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with making those agreements clear and understood, regardless of the nature of the relationship.
Mhm.
I have gone out of my way in my business partnerships and in my marriage and with my children to define things clearly. This is what we're doing here. This is what I am going to do. This is what I would like for you to do. Can you agree to that? I
Yeah. I mean, agreements are interesting too because agreements sometimes change. And that's an
Mhm.
interesting thing when you think about reciprocity. And of course, you always have to make this decision. If you and I agree on something and then you have your kid gets sick and can't make something, I have to make the decision whether I want to keep working with you based on that. Um, some people out there will go, "Oh my god, like, you can't help that." Yeah, but I might have other things going on in my life, right?
Mhm.
And I think we fault people a lot too about, in that case, people will be like, "Oh, Marisa doesn't have kids, so she doesn't understand that Briar does and that things happen." And it's like, no, I absolutely 100% understand. Like, I have raised kids. Like, there's not a capacity in my head where I don't understand that kids get sick randomly and you can't always make it to something. I'm not heartless, but it's something that I have to think about in the future because it still has impact to me, right? And I think we've got to the society again, it's left or right, right?
Right. And also, I don't think we have clear conversations about that. If something comes up with my kid, I notify you and you say, "Yeah, I get it." And also, that's not working for me, right? Because the obligation is on clear communication. It's not on anyone's person, it's on actually making sure that both parties feel heard and understood. So I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of being able to have conversations that are hard, being able to sit with conflict, being able to agree to disagree. There will be things that you and I do not agree on. They may be foundational. What do
I
we
can't wait.
do then? Right? For you and I, that's exciting. Let's have those conversations. There'll be great hour-long debates. There might be amusing mid-journey results in between. Who knows? But it'll be a conversation.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee that with everyone.
No, and that's an interesting part of the rooms that you choose to be in is whether you can do that. And we're getting into like I keep saying this, we're getting into an interesting time, but like, as people are finding their voices and as other people are enabling other voices to be heard, it's a slow process for some of the marginalized groups in the world. But as we're getting more of this, I think people who are not used to hearing different opinions than themselves, or people who are not used to being told how their actions or input have an effect or an impact on other people, how they respond to that is going to determine whether they get to be in the room going forward. Because now new rooms are just being built. I was telling you today, right before this, I was meeting with a collaborator, a conspirator, and we're trying to make changes at the government level, municipal government level, and we're not able to do that with the current government, access. And so now we have to form a coalition of people who we either work around them or we go to the government and say this isn't working. And we have to do that. So we have to create our own room because we haven't been invited to the rooms that are currently being happened, or when we are, we're not heard or even like consulted. The other thing we were talking about, which is an interesting thing about being in the room, is compensation, right? I have given feedback on bylaws and things like that that are impacting my business. And when they're like, "Oh, can you actually just rewrite this?" I'm like, "No, wait, I don't get paid to do this." Wow. Yeah, absolutely I can, but here's my invoice.
Right.
And that is being not heard, right? So you hear this like compensate, you've had education, compensate this person. You're asking somebody a question, compensate this person. And I think this is a bigger conversation that we need to have about the validity of this, because there's a lot of people that are like, I've been used to getting free information my entire life. Why would I compensate people now? We have the internet with free information, paying newspapers, paying media. You now have a media network. I'm creating a media network. We are creating a media network that is not in competition, that is in collaboration, cahoots. But we are going to get faced with people saying, well, why can't you just do this for free? I'm used to getting my news for free.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the way that I am building, and I think a lot of the way that you are building, is to allow for there to be quite a lot of free information. I am not the New York Times. My paywall does not exist today. It exists 2 months from today. If you want to look at the old stuff, you have to become a founding member. That's what it means to do that. But at the same time, I can provide access while also asking to get paid, and not from the people who can't afford access either, right? Because at the end of the day, there is all of this free stuff. I have scholarships for people who can't afford that $25 a month fee, and I recognize that for some people that's out of reach. But we do the work in front of people and then ask for compensation for the service that we provide. For us at the Neurodiversity Media Network, that's still a buy, right? We're creating and building all of these master classes together. And then when the class is done, we will go through and create a syllabi so that members can go in and dig deep into a specific topic. They've got the masterclass. Here's all the books that you should go read that go with that. Here are the people who are teaching additional things. That's what you're paying for. So I think that we, especially now with media the way that it is, with the internet age, the information age means that everything is accessible. That doesn't mean it should be. So figure out where the lines are. And I don't actually think it's that hard. We have truly figured out ways to offer things to paid subscribers above and beyond what I'm offering to everyone else for free. You get to decide what your tolerance levels are. Muted still.
I try to keep quiet because I got there's noises happening around.
I know, me too.
So this is where we talk about paying to be in the room. Paying to be in the room. And I think this is an interesting discussion for people, like you said, there's people who don't have the income right now to be in the room, and we invite them in the room so that it's important. And then we talk about people who compensate, and they compensate for others to be in the room too. And it's knowing that, and it's not to be reciprocated. It's just because they know that they have that privilege and that they have the ability to do that. And that's a conscious decision that people have to make for themselves.
I think that we get to choose to reject the way that compensation has been presented to us. And a big part of that has to do with time. We still live in a society where we are compensated for a product based on our time.
Yeah.
And the sooner you throw that away as an entire fucking paradigm, it has to be thrown out the window.
Yes.
And recognize that payment for services rendered has nothing to do with time.
Yes. We had this exact same conversation with Cheryl yesterday about, we're paying, when someone says, well, how long did it take you to do that? Oh, about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what do you mean? I always answer that, about 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, but what, can I get a detailed invoice of how much time you spent on this project? 30 years? Absolutely. It's not the amount of time I spend on something. It's the impact. It's the outcome. It's the energy, right? We're doing tasks that are exhausting, and they might only be 10 minutes. And you know this as a neurodivergent. We feel we can spend 6 hours working in the garden on our knees, bent over, digging around, lifting stuff, and not even, worry about it. We feel really good. Got to call the bank. 10 minutes. Done for 2 days.
Oh, truly, phone calls are my worst nemesis. I outsource as many phone calls as I can to my partner, to my assistant, to whomever. Please don't make me make a phone call. And I think that it's about scale at that point, right? How do you make money when a phone call wipes you out for 2 days? Well, it can't be about your time anymore.
No.
And the sooner that we reject that paradigm, the easier things become for us. Now, I'm not going to say the money is flowing in, because truly the money is not currently flowing in. And I am profoundly grateful that I live in a household with 2 other income earners who can support me while I'm building something new from the ground. But at the same time, I also am 100% confident in what I'm building, and that a year from now, my neurodiversity media network will be paying the majority of my bills because it's been structured and built that way. And you helped.
Yeah, and I think this is important for anyone listening to this. I mean, this is how you get to be in the room with a bunch of experts, of voices who are not necessarily heard in mainstream media, people who are every day living, breathing, doing cool shit in the world. And part of it is that you allow them to be in the room through your membership. Right now, you can become a founding member at the neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. That's neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. You can enjoy it. Like Briar said, there's no paywall. There's no restriction to that. However, what it means by becoming a paying member is that you're saying it's important for not only Briar to be in the room, but all of the experts, all of the people that Briar is having conversations with. It's important to me that they get into rooms, because here's the reality. What we're doing here and building the Neurodiversity Media Network, and what we're doing in the Catalyst, what we do for external, is really building search engine optimization and credibility scales. So what we can do is, we don't have a huge audience, but every time we link to somebody's website, that adds to an SEO, that's a backlink. Every time we have them on a summit, or we have them in the Neurodiversity Media Network, their credibility score goes up. So what we're doing is we're investing people to be in other rooms based on their participation in these programs that we're creating. So whenever you buy a ticket to our speaker series, or whenever you subscribe for a year to the Neurodiversity Media Network, what you're doing is you're basically saying, I want people to be in the room. I want great people to be in the room. I want to hear them, but I also want to help get them into other rooms where they are able to have a bigger impact.
I think, and I don't know how to say this without just saying it.
Say it.
Most people pay a lot of lip service to the idea of amplifying other voices and do not do that work. They say that I would like to hear from diverse opinions. They don't seek out those diverse opinions.
Right.
They do not do the work to amplify those voices, even within their own platform. And y'all, this isn't hard. If somebody's doing good work, whose work you like and admire, when was the last time you posted and shouted them out? Like, when was the last time you said, hey, this person over here is doing something incredible. I want you to be aware of it. And truly, that's why I built this, because that's what I wanted to be able to do all of the time, was say,
Yeah.
look at my friends, look at what cool shit they're building out in the world. Go learn more, do more of this, because this is what's going to change the world.
Yeah, I mean, even with the Catalyst members, we're sharing what the Catalyst members are doing, the cool things. I'm not doing it to show what I did to help them get there. And this is
Right.
interesting because we saw a case study yesterday. A member came in from another service provider, and that case study was all about how, I mean, and rightly so. You do a case study because you want to showcase how awesome you are, so that people know to buy. But I think there was a little thunder being stole from the person who actually, was
Did the
being
work.
featured, and it was a little uncomfortable. Like, it was just a
Mhm.
little like, I think they did a lot more than what your thing did for them. I think maybe it might contributed, absolutely, but the case study was just a little too much, right? And I don't have, I mean, some people will say that I'm not doing the right thing. I should take the credit, but like, honestly, no, we don't need to do that. We can promote the Catalyst members and allow their work to speak for themselves, allow their work to showcase what we are doing in the Catalyst and what they're working on with the experts inside the Catalyst, because it isn't just me. And this is a great opportunity where we can start to turn the tide. I'm not saying we have all the answers and we know how to do this perfectly, but turn the tide on how we collaborate as well, and how we do give recognition to the work that everybody in the room did to it, if that makes sense.
I want collaboration to be the thing that we all come back to. I want it to feel like it's an essential and integral part of doing not just business, but like doing life.
Yeah.
There are very few things in my life that I haven't learned from someone else, and I would be remiss to not give those people the opportunity to demonstrate those skills.
And the thing is, like, when we talk about being in the room and we take out the roles, you know, someone says, "Oh, I've been in the room all week, but I haven't said anything." I'm like, "That's still an incredibly valuable member, because you have showed up for people who are doing other things. Even if you're just in there, you know, you're not working on anything, you're not talking, you're in that seat, and you're providing body doubling, you're providing support, you're providing just a friendly face so that people know that they're not alone." You know, if you're listening to things on the Neurodiversity Media Network, you are being an active contributor. We may never see a comment from you. You know, some people will pay, they'll sign up to be your founder and they'll never read a thing. But what they're doing is being in the room with you and allowing you to be compensated for doing what you do. We have some members in the Catalyst who we've never seen in a workroom. We hope they one day show up. If you're watching this, please come in. And if you don't know how to come in, send me a note. I will get you in there. But I also know that there are people who have bought into the Catalyst because they're investing in me and my ideas and the people in there too. We do have a few members who have said to me, I'm just an investor. I'm an early stage investor. You don't have I won't ever show up in a room, but know that I'm supporting you. And that's huge. That's a huge part.
It's being in the room isn't just about physically being there. It's about being welcomed. And I think that socially, most of us could be better at that. And it's not that it's a hard skill, it's that it is an unpracticed one. But figuring out ways to invite people into your world, to invite them into your spaces, is always going to be worth your time.
And practice the way that, I mean, you like to be welcome. Practice being welcomed, I think, is an interesting thing too, because I think we keep ourselves out of a lot of really great rooms because we think that we're not going to fit in. And sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're going to walk in and be like, "Hello, everybody." And they're going to be like, "You can't sit with us." And that's okay. But it's also like, keep going into more rooms and keep kind of saying like, "Hey, can I be in here? Can I just listen? Can I be a part of this?" We don't always have to take over the room. We don't have to be, you know, like talking in the room. We don't always have to, but sometimes just being in the corner of the room, or making sure that the room is standing. We're building the room, you know, we're making sure the door is fixed. We're making sure that the chairs are stable. Those are all important parts. They're kind of still roles, but people sometimes don't realize that their impact or their contribution has very little to do with, you know, what actually happened in the room, but made what happened in the room possible.
I also think we deeply undervalue what a supportive contribution can be when we're not opening our faces, right? Like, how can you be a supportive person in the room without having an opinion? How can you just be there? The more that we understand the ways in which we need to be seen and the ways in which we can just be available, and they're two different things, the easier it becomes to walk into rooms where you don't know what the reception is going to be. And truly, that's where we want everyone to get to, Marisa and I. We want you to be able to walk into the room with your head held high and go, "I belong in this space."
Yeah. Yeah. And that you do have a right to be in those spaces, you know, that there is room. You know, sometimes the rooms feel really tiny, but you know, I know in the Catalyst, we can just keep adding seats. I can just keep making the room bigger if we need to.
And she will
Or I'll
too.
keep
She'll just
making new rooms.
add
Yeah.
another rug, or there'll be a new room. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. There's room for everyone, and that's always true.
Yeah, and like, we get to determine what's in that room, like, what makes it
Mm.
accessible, what makes it, enjoyable to be in there, and who do we want in there with us, and I think that's an important lesson that we can take wherever we are in our world. Briar, you are, as always, an incredible guest. I love talking
Thank
to you, and I know we
you.
can talk forever.
We
Uh,
really could. We could do this for hours and hours longer, but
I will say this, become a founding member of the Neurodiversity Media Network. It is a opportunity, again, to help more voices be in more rooms. Voices that really deserve to be heard. The content is phenomenal. There's a lot of variety. It is not for business people. It is for everyday people, just living their lives, doing things. There is some business stuff. There's some personal stuff. There's lots of things in there to consider as well. Briar is looking for sponsors, and this is really important because these are opportunities for you to get in front of audiences that are already ready to buy. Because you think about this, she's building a paid newsletter that has subscription. People are already ready to pay to read and be a part of this content. Now, as a sponsor, you have the opportunity to be in front of people who already are used to paying for content, who are paying for access. It's such a great way for you to be in front of a dynamic, diverse, and very involved community. So if you are looking to open up your sponsorship channels and be a part of something at that founding level of getting in there and really, and some of the things that we've talked about are very interesting ways to be a sponsor. It isn't just having a banner over something. We have been talking about really cool ways to expand what sponsorship looks like, especially in the digital space. So go on over to briarharvey.com/partners. There's so much opportunity for you there to become either a founding member or a partner or a sponsor or both, and be in the room, and also be a part of making sure that Briar's room thrives, which I think is essential.
thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us again with Be in the Room. This is a new podcast by Create the Rules. We are so excited to be hearing from, leaders, change makers, risk takers, and people who really want to explore what it's like to be a part of a community, be in the room, have a voice, be a participant without necessarily taking on roles or creating labor or, having to be responsible for making sure that that room thrives. Sometimes we just need to be nourished and nurtured as well, and that's a part of being in the room. So we'll look forward to more episodes. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Briar. I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.